Hello and welcome to Knowing the Background. On this channel I'd like to focus on topics from the area of history, socio-economic issues and geopolitics, as well as several other side topics like differences between cultures and languages and so on. In other words, all of them falling into the category of what's called in English humanities, as opposed to sciences. By the way, I say that that's how it's distinguished in English because in German and in Polish, and I also think in pretty much every other language other than English, humanities are considered to be sciences too. It's just that you have what's called sciences in English is natural sciences in every other language, and these languages are called sciences of the mind, for instance. That's what the Germans say, Geisteswissenschaften. Yeah. Okay. But anyhow, surprise, surprise, this video is about geology, which arguably is a natural science. Now, how did that happen? The reason is that I watched a video recently by a YouTuber that I value very much, AronRa, and was a trusting video about excavations carried out in South Africa. And the problem was there were two statements were made in this video about geology, which I happen to know are wrong. And for that reason, I just wanted to clarify it. For one, because I'm pretty confident that AronRa will take them into account, because he's a open-minded scientist. Second reason is to clarify things for you. Hi Aaron, thanks for your video on Paleo South Africa. I think it was a great idea to put a geochronologist and paleontologist into the same video. That was a very good approach to explaining how those two elements work together and how dating fossil finds works. That was a very good approach, I think, and I really enjoyed that video. However, there's one element in between, if you like the element that literally connects fossil finds with data on radioisotopic decay is the rock that surrounds the fossils, right? So I think you should have had also a geologist, but you didn't. And that might be the reason why we have two wrong statements. Now, the first statement was made by Dr. Jehan Ramazani, who said that we can rely on the fact that, or we can rely on the assumption that young layers are always on top of the older ones. That's not always true. The other statement was made by you. You said, well, yes, because there is no mechanism which could insert younger layers of sediment underneath older ones. And that statement isn't true either. So here is the explanation why. Now, first of all, I should say that I am not a geologist. I just happen to be the son of a geologist, and also my godfather is a geologist. And my fiance's father was a geologist, and so was her mother. So if one could be geologist by association, I probably would be, but I'm not. Right? However, I happen to know that the logical order of things, that you have, young layers on top and old layers on below that, can be disrupted. It can even be inverted. And I know because I have seen one of those inversion zones myself. In northern Germany, in the North German plain, which is part of the North European plain that stretches from the Benelux countries right into, I think, the Baltics even. So right in that fairly flat land, as a sudden, you have a mountain range. The so-called Harz Mountains. The Harz Mountains are mostly limestone, and how did they get there? Now, they are made from maritime deposits. So around the Silurian period, around 450 million years ago, it formed on the bottom of an ocean that was there for a very long period of time. However, when the African plate started to press against the Eurasian plate, in addition to having piled up the Alps, it also caused those limestone deposits to fracture. Maybe the fracturing happened earlier, I don't know that, but as a matter of fact, there are several gigantic slabs of limestone deep under the ground, and one of those slabs started to be pushed out of the ground. So in a, well, geologically typically slow manner, it started to emerge from the ground. And what happened is, well, first of all, obviously it would push younger sediments into, well, above the ground, the usual ground level, and those deposits are gone. So this is why when you are on top of the Harz Mountains, all you see are those Silurian deposits, those limestone deposits, and nothing of the younger stuff that was, so to say, pushed upwards. But what's more interesting is what happened with the younger layers close to the Harz Mountains, if you like, at the fringes of that gigantic limestone slab. Because there, what happened is that the orderly layers were pushed up and started even to have a vertical angle. More than that, they would even in some points be pushed to the other side. And so you would have an inverted order. As a sudden, this would be young and that would be old. And obviously all of that would, get eroded away to a certain layer. Now, so that's what's called an inversion zone. And I have seen one of those in a quarry close to the Harz Mountains back when I was a child. Now, I thought about putting in some images which I could find on the internet, which I was searching a little bit for this video, but I couldn't really. First of all, I didn't want to insert any pictures. I'd love to, because I do not know how the copyright situation is. What I think I'm gonna do is to add some links so you can check yourself. However, I have to say what pains me a lot is that I have not made pictures back then myself. But as an excuse, I was a teenager and it was the pre-digital age. It's not that everybody had a cell phone with an integrated camera, right? So I didn't take any pictures, and for that reason I am not entirely sure if the image that I have in my head corresponds to reality. I don't know if I have the right memory, because I think I remember that in the quarry there were several dozen meters of wall exposed of that inversion zone, and that you could actually see how the angle of the layers goes from an angle like this, straightening out, that you can see that it creates an arc, and then it starts so it's vertical, and then it starts to have another angle, and you could just continue that logically in your head and say, okay, so apparently if that continues, then it must, you know, go around like that. You can't see this now, okay, but it goes around like this, so it's really bent. Now some graphics showing the cross sections would show that, but I'm not entirely sure if I really saw it myself. I thought I was, until I started to, well, search for images which would show the inversion zone on the internet. And the problem is, the best I could find on the internet in the last, well, few days, ever since you published that video, shows, well, at the, it shows, well, definitely the tilted arrangement of the layers. Although if you look only on those, you might think, well, maybe that's the young one, or maybe that's the old one, right? How can I know that this is the young one? On some images, or maybe basically on one image, you could photograph actually, on one of the photographs, you could see that you have an arc-like structure, that you see that there is a tendency like this, but it doesn't go to the point where the layers are vertical and then continue to, well, that you have this turnaround. So you don't see that anywhere. And I thought, well, if this quarry really existed and looked as I remember it, then the internet would be full of those images showing exactly that, you know, that this nice full arc, maybe not full, okay, but at least, you know, that part, there's this like bow-shaped fraction of the layers. And I came to the conclusion that since I can't find those images, then probably my childish mind has kind of expanded the part that I have seen to even more. But anyhow, every geological map of that area, and in particular every cross-section, every geological cross-section of that area, will show you that that's exactly what's going on there. It is an inversion zone. In German it's called Aufrichtungszone, which literally translates as erection zone, because the layers are put upright. They are, you know, erected straight up, and they even, you know, tilt to the other side. So, well, that's why it's called an inversion zone. So in other words, no, we cannot rely that we're going to find layers always young on top, older below, because there can be quite significant disruptions. And inversions, by the way, is only the most extreme case. We can also have fault lines. For instance, you can have a nice layer system, but then, for instance, there can be a fracture basically here within them, and this side can just slide down, or the other way around. It can slide up and then overlap a little bit with the other layers. And so if you would drill down that hole, you would realize, okay, this is young, then it's older, and then, oh, it's as young as on top again, right? So only in the context could you realize that, oh, okay, I realize what happened here. But if you would drill in only that one place, you will find a disruption of the chronology, based on what you find in the borehole. Okay, so much for inversion. Now about the other statement, the statement that you made. Okay, so much for Dr. Jehan Ramazani's claim. Now about your claim that there is no mechanism to insert young layers underneath old ones. That totally happens, at least when it comes to plate tectonics. Now, we probably know that, well, that's what everybody learns about geology, is that the Himalayan mountains are the result of the Indian plate, or pressing against the Eurasian plate, and that what happens is that both plates just crash and they just basically pile up. Um, that's not what always happens. So plates, tectonic plates, they can just simply rub against each other and just basically, just slide along their side. They can obviously also move away from each other. That's what's happening in East Africa, where Africa will break apart at some point in time. But the other thing that can happen is that one plate, when two plates crash, that one plate just is pressed underneath the other one, while the other one is pressed upwards a little bit. And guess what? That's where you get the Rocky Mountains from. I don't know about the Andes, possibly too, but definitely when it comes to the Rocky Mountains, the North American plate, there are three plates from the Pacific side which are currently pressed underneath the North American plate. Now that piles up the Rocky Mountains on the one hand, but there are also the three other plates are being submerged, and those are called submersion zones. So, so if one could drill, let's say, through the Rocky Mountains, downwards, like through the entire, actually through the crust, right, through the North American plate, and one could drill into the plate that's one of those three plates that's being pressed underneath it, then obviously the chronology of the layers would be disturbed, right? So first, you have from young to old, and then it would again start to get young as a sudden the layers that we would find would be significantly younger than the oldest ones that we have on the North American plate. Now, what I don't know is if this large-scale phenomenon of that an entire tectonic plates can be, submerged, if that can be a problem for dating. I think it can't, because I think that you cannot, we are unable to drill as deep as to go through, as to drill through an entire tectonic plate and then start to drill into another tectonic plate that's underneath it. So I think we can't do that simply because of technological constraints. The deepest we ever drilled was a Soviet project from I think the 1980s, maybe 70s, but we never drilled through a tectonic plate. So in other words, what I just described here proves the point that there are mechanisms of inserting younger layers underneath old ones, but it wouldn't be an issue when it comes to this whole dating fossils thing, right? However, because I am not a geologist, I am not entirely sure. I wouldn't be surprised if when as is the case, let's say in the area of the Harz Mountains, that if if a pressure is applied to a certain area which is strong enough to push out an entire mountain range of limestone out of the ground, I don't know if such pressures occur. It cannot be that, for instance, layers which are next to each other start to be pressed into each other, maybe pile up, and for instance, let's say that the harder layers, which sometimes happens, that these layers are harder. For instance, they might be pushed like between the softer layers, or because these two are it's the same layer, right? Okay, we have a fracture here, and they start to be pushed like one above the other, for instance, and then we might again get some sort of disruption of the strata of the stratus. Now, I don't know that. I can only refer to the general principle that at least when it comes to plate tectonics, there is a mechanism that actually does that. Well, not exactly insert, but kind of submerges young layers underneath older layers. And I wouldn't exclude the possibility that this can happen on a level that could indeed disrupt the strata which are accessible to us. Okay, so much for rectifying those two statements that were made in the video. I have to say, I had certain doubts if I should make this video. The first one relates to Christian apologetics that, well, as you know, will eagerly take any argument which supports their doubts with regard to science in general, scientific methodology or claims made by science. And I thought, okay, Jesus Christ, if I mention that, if I say, hey, wait, no, we can't really rely on that, on this chronological order of layers, then they're gonna take it and use it against science. But then again, the strength of the scientific method is to accept that one has to correct certain statements, and eventually this advances the stash of knowledge that we have, and that brings us all forward, right? The second doubt I had comes from the fact that after these two statements, Dr. Jehan Ramazani actually basically he said something that implied that well, there can be a disruption. Namely, he said that even if the layers are in reverse order, geologists can identify that. And yeah, that's the point. The fact that the statement that that we can rely on the chronological order from top to bottom, the fact that the statement is wrong, if you say it like this, if you generalize it, isn't really a problem, because everything I just told you, the inversion zones, and there's also more there are fault lines and so on, and also the subduction zones, these are all processes that geologists know about, and for that reason they can identify them. If layers are in a reverse order, if they are put in a vertical position, or even tilted to the other direction, geologists are those who can identify that. And if there are any doubts, for instance, on the side of geochronologists or on the side of paleontologists, like, are we actually progressing? If we go from here to there, or if you go deeper, is it actually getting older? Is it getting younger? They are the geologists can clarify that. It's really not an issue if you have a geologist around, that is, right? So for that reason alone, I could have skipped the whole video. The reason I made it was that it was just brushed over a little bit. So he said it's not a problem, but he didn't. Well, but his statement implies that, okay, you can't generalize the way I just did. So he basically he rectified his own, he corrected his own statement, but this correction was kind of implied. So I thought it makes sense to actually to explain, and not in detail, but to actually explain that why it can be different, why that there can be a disruption of the chronological order, right? Yeah, so much for that. Third doubt that I had is what I mentioned already at the beginning. I'm not a geologist, so as in your words, I'm just a guy. And I think it would be much better if obviously if you would have a real geologist around. So yeah, maybe take that as a suggestion to maybe make a video, maybe only with a geologist, or maybe again with a paleontologist and a geochronologist, but also with a geologist. And I guess then you could present viewers with the whole logical chain from saying, oh, we have fossils. Then the geologist can say, okay, these fossils are in the following layer, which is positioned, which has this angle, and these are older, these are younger. Based on what we know about sedimentation, the age difference between the layers should be around this and this, and then the third step would be the geochronologist, who would then put absolute dates on the respective layers, and would therefore allow to date the actual fossil. Yeah, just a thought. Now that you're planning a trip to South Africa, you may not have the time for this, but maybe it's an idea that you will put into reality. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful for you, Aaron, and for you, anyone else who's watching this. All my other videos, well, most of my other videos should be about other topics than geology, but I hope that you enjoyed this little digression. I might come back to the topic if need be. Thanks a lot, and goodbye.